There are no readings that accompany the material I'm talking about today, and you can anticipate that in the next quiz, beyond the syllabus quiz, material from today's content will be taking shape as quiz questions. So you decide whether or not you want to take notes, as well as if you want to look at the video afterwards. But computers really only do 4 things. Now, I remember back like early 90s when we were having a conference. I used to be a journalist, and I was one of the first online journalists in Indian country, and that predates Indian country today. This was the American Indian Communications Network, of which I was a stringer. And I remember going to a conference of journalists, and one elder standing up and saying, "I've got no use for computers. All computers do is mess up my Social Security check." No, the computer did that. Some person did that when they input the data into the computer. It wasn't the computer. All right, it was a person. Computers do 4 things. They input information, they process it, they output, and they store it. That's it. Anything else is human functions. And when we look at the different types of computers that are available to us.
The difficulty of managing a business today is that when you're up to your drawers in day-to-day problems, you can lose sight of your original intention. And if you're busy enough trying to be a business expert, you've hardly got the time to become a computer expert. Apple Macintosh is a computer system that gets straight down to business. So in no time at all, you can assess the number of alligators, analyze the market prices for schemes, create a new range of handbags, shoes and wallets, print out plans for draining the swamp, and have the whole project completed with enough time to do some really long-range thinking.
That's an early Apple computer ad.
Gets straight down to business.
And that is the precursor to the one that's sitting in front of you right now. It's changed considerably from that time because it's easily twice the size and height, but maybe 1/6 of the breadth. And it's easily 300 times more powerful. And when we're looking at personal computers then, those are the ones we use in the home or office for general tasks. All right, these are personal computers. Although they're at the school, they're still personal computers. And they may take the form of a desktop, which we have here. We have notebooks, such as laptops, such as the MacBook. Anyone here who has a tablet, such as the iPad or Android-based tablets, all right, those are all, or a Windows-based tablet, all right, those are pretty much touch screen now. And you also have the sub-notebooks, such as ultra portables, or mini notebooks, such as netbooks. So, for example, Chrome has one. All right, this is meant mainly for, and they call them netbook, mainly because they're supposed to surf the internet. That's all you use them for is browsing. If you try to use them for very intensive media, sound, pictures, or video processing, they're not going to work. Right? They don't have enough capacity to be able to handle it. All right, so the different types of computers that we would look available to us, whether they be, we're looking at an early MacBook here. All right, we still have some of these, by the way, and they were given new life. These, if you've got one of these white computers, one of these white laptops, I mean, that's a zombie computer. It was dead 3 years ago, and then Russell Stallings had the idea that perhaps we can resuscitate them and give them a little bit of speed by installing solid-state drives in them instead of your regular hard drives. And we'll go over the solid state in just a minute. And then all of a sudden, these computers have new life. So if you've got one of these computers, it's a zombie. All right, it's been given new life, what we would call digimancy in the business. The iPhone, all right, as a handheld computer. We've got the iPad. And once again, I don't own any stock in Apple or Macintosh. It's just that these are the easiest examples to portray for you. Now, one of the things that it is a good idea when we think about the different vocations that we're in. If you are an arts-related business, Macintosh, Apple is the industry standard. 90% of anyone who's involved in the arts is using a Mac. Whereas if you are in very strongly business-oriented vocations, PC tends to be the standard. So in many ways, you look at matching even the system, all right, with the vocation that you're in. The cost in maintaining your own computer, if you learn just a little bit on how to do your own maintenance, will save you enough to buy you a whole new computer for any of the kinds of upgrades that you want to do. So that's why I'm giving you a little bit on hardware and software today. But when you're looking at hardware, these are the actual physical components of a computer. So the hardware is going to be this right here, what we would call the motherboard inside. Right? The circuitry, what we would call the architecture. The software tends to be the intangible things, particularly programs. All right? The software is installed onto the hardware to make the hardware do its work. And what's amazing with software is that the forms that it has taken. Have you ever heard the term floppy disk? Why were they called floppy disks? They were floppy. They weren't hard, all right? They were floppy. The first computer I had, the floppy disk on it, did I just back that up? Yeah. Hold on a second here, put it in my pocket. The disk was this big. I was amazed when they shrunk it down half the size to 5 1/4 inches. And it held a whopping 360 kilobytes of information. That's about, on this computer here, it's about 1 sentence of information. And I couldn't believe it. I would never fill one of those disks. And then I was astounded when they shrunk down to 3 1/2 inches, and they had a hard plastic covering over them that made them seem indestructible. And I couldn't believe that they would hold 1.2 megabytes of information. That's a really crappy cell phone picture now. I thought I'd never fill one of those up. And then they came out with zip drives, which had a really hard casing on them, held 100 megabytes of information. I thought I'd never use that. And the software, they are moving now, because you can download your stuff right from the cloud now. One of the ideas that is very, I'll bet you see it within the next 3 years, where you'll take your iPhone to the store, or you'll take your laptop, your MacBook to the store, and you will move it over a barcode reader, and it will install your programs that quick. Literally, like if you go to the grocery line, and you know how they move produce and stuff, or they move the tags across that infrared light there? That's how software is going to be installed. It's moving that fast. And then the operating system is what controls the input, output, manages your disk space, maintains security, detects equipment failure. Your operating system is, in essence, if you are PC-based, it's Windows. If you're Windows-based, it's Microsoft Windows, Microsoft. If you are using a Mac, you're going to have OS X. And then there's also another operating system out there called Linux, and I'll get to that in just a moment. And when we're looking at computer systems, if we look at a checklist, you have the architecture or the configuration of the computer. Some of the typical things about configuration are the type of graphics that it is using, the type of graphics card or graphics chips that are installed, the amount of RAM, random access memory that's installed, the USB ports that are installed, or what they would call your FireWire or Lightning or whatever different types of inputs and outputs are now available to us. And you also have your data, and that is the information that is being transferred either to the computer or off. You have the motherboard. You have the circuits, which are the electrical pads. You have your central processing unit, as well as the various cards that may be installed. Now, one of the things when you buy a PC, they're a lot more tailorable than if you buy an iMac. because the iMac is pretty much self-contained. That's why if you're going to buy an iMac, you want to buy it with the maximum that it can hold, because it becomes very difficult to make any changes to it afterwards. Because you actually have to take it, but you actually void your warranty by cracking the hood on your iMac. So unless you really know what you're doing, you want to buy that computer maxed out at its maximum capabilities. So the cards could be your sound cards. And there are differences in sound cards. If you're a musician, you want to make sure that you're using a very high-end sound card, because the integrity of the sound that you're recording needs to be preserved and maintained, as compared to just using a Sound Blaster Audigy, which used to be one of the high-end cards. All right, those are crap cards. All right, they're made for consumers. When you are a professional, you're looking at higher-end cards. Video cards or video graphics cards, also depending on the type of work you're doing. If you're doing simple word processing and you're spending $500 on a graphics card, that's kind of a waste of money. It's like a nuclear fly swatter. If all you're doing is looking at text and you've got something that you can do the next Star Wars on, you're paying too much and using it too little. So you want to make sure that if you are pricing a system, that it's doing what you want it to do. So you're not paying for things you're not going to use, which includes sound and graphics. You have your input and output, including peripheral devices. Input devices include something like keyboards or mouse, anything that is putting information in. Your keyboard is an input. This little USB dongle here is an input. It's an input that allows me to control the slide. So it's an input on an input. Your flash drives are inputs. Your mouse is an input. A mouse ball or a trackball is an input. Your trackpad, if you're using an iMac, that's an input. Those are all inputs. As compared to outputs, might be something like the monitor. Right, so that's why this is self-contained, because the output is already built into this. You can upgrade the graphics card. It's not going to change what it's outputting. You'd actually have to improve the monitor itself. So that's self-contained on here. And then printers are also outputs. And when we look at the complexity of what computers do as compared to the simplicity of their design, this is an older motherboard as well as an older microprocessor, central processing unit. And when you look at this, and when people would pop the head off a PC, you look at it and think, oh my God, how do they do this? All right, most of this is done in Korea, China. Right, most of the architecture here. Now in the Philippines, right, it's being done by slave labor. People who work for the United States and other parts of the world. But all the circuitry in here is all pre-done before you even buy the computer. That you got to be aware if you are going to take a chance and open up the hood on your PC, because if you touch something and it creates just a little lightning bolt, and you ever get shocked by someone when they touch you? All right, if you touch that motherboard and you touch one of those circuits, you'll chance frying everything. So if you're going to work on a computer, you want to make sure you're one of those geeks that has a little Velcro wristband on you that grounds you. You attach it to a ground, and then so when you're working on it, it will discharge static electricity. But in earlier days, when you had these different slots here, all right, these slots here would go to your disk drives. This went to your power supply. This went to your random access memory. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. Your central processing unit, this is the most important part of this computer. This is where all the work is being done. And this would reside in this slot here, and then would be covered by a fan or some type of cooler. Because when these things are turned on and they are performing zillions of operations per minute, they generate a lot of heat. Matter of fact, if you were to put your hand on the back of your computer on Wednesday, and you'll feel, it may even still be that way now from just being on a little bit. There's a reason it's hot. And it's not hot because of the monitor. It's hot because of the operations that microprocessor is doing. And it's a good idea then when you're looking at buying a computer for yourself. If you're going to buy a PC, you want to know what generation of processor is in it. So is it an i5? Is it an i7 or an i3? Because and it could be, they could all be quad core, as they would say, which means there are 4 processors operating at once. It's like there's 4 brains going at once instead of 1. But if you're getting an i7 processor, you want to know which generation it is, because i7's been around for a little bit now, and they have been improved dang near every 6 months. That's why, you ever heard of Black Friday? And you got all these computer deals, you think they're amazing deals? No, there are sales to get rid of outdated computer components, for example, or computers. Right? You're not getting anything new and fantastic, you're getting last year's stuff. It's like it's 2017, and you go onto a car lot and you're buying a 2016 car, it's going to be cheaper because the dealer's trying to get rid of their old stuff. So you want to be aware even the generation of processor that your computer has. And that includes whether it be a PC or a Mac. Now, memory. There are several types of memory, but the only 2 you really need to think about would be what we would call random access memory, or RAM. And those are chips, because they are the area when you turn your computer on that all of the information that is going to make that computer work is put into it. All of the instructions of all the programs they're going to run are put into the RAM. When you turn the computer off, RAM empties out, and that computer won't do anything. So you can stand in front of it and you can say, "Computer! Computer! Computer!" Not going to happen. So it loads all the instructions in there. Anything you want to do is going to happen as long as the computer's turned on. Once you turn the computer off, all the stuff dumps out. You also have read-only memory. You ever heard of CD-ROM? CD-ROMs are one type of storage media. And I remember people thought when CD-ROMs came out that these things are indestructible, that those will last forever. Well, no. Even if you take pristine care of them, in about 100 years that ROM will be unplayable because they're made of plastic. What is plastic? It's made from oil. Yeah, it's made from petroleum, sure. Believe it or not, it's actually a liquid. The same way glass is actually a liquid. Have you ever gone to an old house and you see a window and it looks like the window panes have melted? The glass is so old. That's what happens with those ROMs. They melt at a really slow rate. And as they melt, the data deteriorates. That's why it's a good idea. When we were looking at it, and all it does is it reads. Although you can, if you burn a CD-ROM, what you've done is you've taken a storage media device and then you've made it into something that can only read information from it. All right, read-only memory. So random access temporarily holds programs and data, and read-only stores instructions that a computer is going to use to check the system components as well as to run programs. That's also why when you're using Microsoft Word, for example, and you've started up Microsoft Word, and it may take a little bit of time for that program to start up and for the whole program to load before you can start working on it. If you leave the computer turned on, even if you close Microsoft Word, the next time you turn Microsoft Word on, it will load faster because the information to start that program has been stored in the random access memory. So it's temporary, but once again, when you turn it off, it leaves. Where CD-ROMs, more and more now, are there any gamers in here? When you get the, you can still get what they call DLC. What DLC mean? Downloadable content. So the expansions and the like, you can go to Microsoft or whatever, and you download those programs over the internet. And it's more and more headed that way. More and more games are coming to the point where you cannot buy a ROM. More and more it will get so the only way you can play that game is to download the image from the internet. And there is an advantage in that, because for the software programmers, have you ever heard of software piracy? Anybody? Theft of intellectual property? There is the Software Piracy Act now that's in place. That if you ever, has anyone here ever heard of a torrent? What's usually exchanged over torrents? Highly questionable content. Usually intellectual property that has been somehow reverse engineered and puts it in a format that you can download it to your machine and play it if you're a gamer, or run it if you are, for example, if you're editing digital video. But there's an advantage then to keeping things so that they reside on the internet now, because it allows anyone from any of these software companies to check where those programs are going. Because as soon as you download something, they all have instructions in them now to phone home. And that company can actually find the computer that pirated program is on. So if you're using pirated software, your days are limited. So the storage devices that you have. I talked about RAM. So it not only where you are receiving data from the RAM, the work that's being done, but then it's saved to some type of device. So you have magnetic storage device, such as a hard disk. The hard disks in here consist of moving parts. It's actually a metal disk that spins at a really fast rate, and it is magnetic. And so the data from whatever you're doing is encoded, saved magnetically onto that disk. And you can, in essence, demagnetize it and remove that data. But even when you remove the data, the feds can go in, and unless you've gone to some facility where you pay them to destroy the data on that disk, the feds can get it back. So even if you've had a hard disk failure, there are ways to retrieve information that was on that disk. So if you are working with sensitive information, you actually have to take it to a place that disposes of data. They either shred paper or they destroy hard disks, and then you get a little sticker on it that says, the data on this disk has been destroyed, certified destroyed. And that means nobody can access that data. And what's happening with that hard disk is that disk is spinning at a really fast rate. And that also, if you were to put your ears when these are on, if you put your ear to it, you'll actually hear the disk spinning. What happens after a while, though, because it's moving parts, hard disks fail. You have optical storage devices such as CDs, DVDs, Blu-ray. All right, and optical means that there is a laser light that is reading that digital information and then either doing work with it or storing it someplace. Even if you look at the difference of a movie that has been encoded to a CD as compared to a movie that's encoded to a DVD, the clarity of the sound as well as the image as compared to Blu-ray discs. Right, that the amount of information stored on each is exponentially larger, and the quality of the sound as well as pictures is exponentially better. You have flash memory, and that's solid-state storage. Now, solid-state, as I mentioned, those white MacBooks that are zombie computers that have solid-state storage in them. They have no moving parts. They are like really big flash drives, but the advantage of that solid-state drive over your USB flash drives is that every time you take that USB and you plug it into your iMac, you plug it into some USB port, there is a static discharge. And eventually it fries the drive. That's why this should be just something that you carry around. Don't put your whole life's work on this, because you only got to lose it once. This is why we're going to emphasize the cloud heavily in this class. And one of your homework assignments actually requires you to set up a Dropbox account as cloud storage, because you're at IAIA for only up to 4 years, or if you're in the master's, maybe up to 6, and if you're really slow, up to 10, depending on how long you take. Regardless, once you leave IAIA, within 1 year, your OneDrive account will no longer be accessible. because your email account will be shut down. All right, so once you leave here, it's bye, see ya, your email's gone. Once your email's gone, so is your OneDrive. So you want to have access to cloud storage beyond IAIA. That's why I show you Dropbox.
Please. Computer? Computer? Ah. Hello, computer.
Just use the keyboard.
Keyboard. Oh, great.
When PCs first came out, the idea that you could actually stand here and with your computer in sleep mode, go, hey! And have it wake up. All right, that was never going to happen. All right, that was science fiction, Star Trek kind of stuff. And I can stand here. You might have seen me walking around because I'll put this here and I'll say, all I got to do is I can say, hey, ISIS.
Checking on that. Okay, I found this on the web for was the hottest. Hey, ISIS.
Don't want to be doing that. Why?
You can track you.
I'm going to track ISIS right to my phone if I follow up on any of that. As compared to saying, hey Siri,
What would you like to search for?
call Stephen Fadden.
Okay, I found this on the web for call Stephen Fadden.
Absolutely mind-blowing. It's a computer that makes phone calls. But the idea you could actually talk to one as an input, because the input on here is a microphone. And that microphone is able to transmit my sonic information and turn it into digital. In essence, it's able to take analog information, which is sequential, and then turn it into digital, which in essence is random access. So input devices, anything that you use to put commands or data into a computer. The keyboard, mice, scroll wheel, trackball, touch screen, scanner, microphones, other kinds of wireless devices. Is anyone here where you use your cell phone a lot and you're used to hitting the touch screen so much, then you get home and you're in front of your PC and you find yourself hitting your PC, trying to touch your PC? I do that a lot because I use my iPad a lot too. And I get back to my office and I'm there hitting it on my screen and wondering why nothing's happening. And if I've been eating potato chips, it looks really ugly. But the idea I could actually touch the screen and cause something to happen now, even 10 years ago, was a fantasy. So whether it be a Bluetooth keyboard, whether it be a wireless or a wired keyboard, whether it be a trackball or the trackpad, right, these are all ways that we are inputting information. When we're doing output, they display the results of data processing. Whether it be the monitor, which displays the output from the computer or printer, that produces what they would call hard copy or paper copy, text, graphics that have been processed by the computer, and then speakers that allow you to hear the sounds from a computer. Printers are unbelievable now. Has anyone been over to the Fab Lab yet? Because the Fab Lab is a three-dimensional printer. Right? But it's amazing now what is starting to happen. Or an output being a hologram. The sensation when you saw Snoop Dogg at Coachella. Did anyone see that? Snoop Dogg at Coachella with who? Tupac. I mean, that is my dream where I can pre-record me in a hologram and then show up for class while sitting at home in my pajamas, sipping a V8. All right, but I can put a nice suit on me. All right, but that is output. Even holograms now, output. It's astounding what's occurring in your lifetime. The changes that you are going to see as a result of computer technology. When we're looking at output devices, whether we're looking at LCD or LED, liquid crystal display, you see on a lot of laptops. So if you have a laptop and you push your finger onto the screen and it appears like there's water moving on it, all right, look, this appears to be a little bit fluid, all right, that's what they would call liquid crystal display. As compared to light-emitting diode, all right, which is what we see on the iMacs here. Now, in the earlier days, they had what were called cathode ray tube. All right, and they were much like television screens, and they were poorer graphics quality and were much more of a strain on the eyes. You also have screen size to consider. Now, the screen size is not from the top of the screen here to the bottom diagonally here. The screen size is the actual display area, independent of the housing. Right, so if you're buying a 29-inch screen, for example, you might actually be getting only 26 inches of viewable area. So you want to be aware when you're looking at a screen size when buying a computer. And then graphics display. Pixels relate to resolution as well as dot pitch, and that includes what you're printing. So you have video graphics cards, so you have your display adapters as well as video cards. And the adapters being the different types of monitors that you can use as output from, for example, your laptop. And when you have a built-in graphics card, and that includes on an iMac, in order to display high resolution, you're actually drawing away from the computer's capacity to process information quickly because it's having to put information out graphically as a display. So that's why I say when you buy a computer, PC or Mac, you want to get it as much as it will hold. Don't sell yourself cheap. Because if you buy, you can go into Walmart right now and you can buy a desktop for like, $320. And then you'll find out it's not much better than a netbook. Because to run the new Windows 10, it's going to need a lot of RAM in it, and it might only have 4 gigabytes of RAM in it. And then you're going to have to upgrade the RAM. So if you can, buy everything maxed out. So over the summer, I just bought an iMac, and it's got a 27-inch display on it, and I had it maxed out at 64 gigabytes of random access memory. That's a lot of memory for what I'm just using for simple videos. So you want to make sure you get as much as that computer will hold. And when we're looking at resolution, whether it be in print, now when you're looking at print, for example, that's been printed out from a computer such as this, on this sheet here, this is probably 300 dots per inch. All right, so if you were to get a magnifying glass and put it on this copy here, you would actually see dots. Have you ever looked at a newspaper with a magnifying glass? All right, and actually those letters are made up of dots. All right, so the more dots you can compress into an area, you get a higher resolution image. That's why if I were to turn this monitor into 800 by 600, it would look really crappy pictures and really big icons. And I would get a higher resolution, a higher integrity image when I'm using the higher display settings. So if you are doing a lot of image processing, whether it be photos or video, you want to make sure you're spending a lot of money on your graphics card. If you're doing a lot of creating music, you want to spend a lot of money on your sound card or on the computers that are loaded for sound or graphics.